Even the toughest and most durable fighters have a breaking point, and inside the cage, sometimes it takes just one perfect shot to leave your opponent completely legless, or doing the chicken dance as they say. These are 8 terrifying strikes that turned fighters into jelly. One of the sport's most heated rivalries also featured one of the single most brutal finishing sequences imaginable, as Jon Jones brought his memorable feud with Daniel Cormier to its end in the 3rd round of their UFC 214 headliner. It's easy to forget just how competitive it was up until that point, but when Jones found that picture-perfect left head kick, it was clear that DC was in some very real trouble. With his bell rung and his balance completely off, Cormier flowed backwards in complete survival mode. Jones, who sensed the finish, being the veteran that he is, tripped him up before taking the top position and pounding him out. It was as conclusive of a finish as it could be, as Jon exploited Cormier's tendency to instinctively lean his head to the right before punishing the former Olympian with some truly venomous ground and pound. A stunning finish and fitting opener for our list. This next one is definitely an oddity. For the most part, Edson Barboza versus Shane Burgos had been engaging in a pretty competitive affair, with each man displaying uncoachable toughness and grit. But Edson, even at 145 pounds, just isn't built like most strikers. And though Burgos is a warrior, when that 3rd round came, it was clear that he was starting to wilt. What was truly strange, however, was the freakish nature of the eventual TKO finish. Burgos had just eaten a swift overhand from his opponent, and all things considered, he still looked pretty unfazed. But within 2 to 3 seconds, in what was a delayed reaction, he completely lost his balance, falling backwards to the cage before the referee Mike Beltran stepped in to call it. Seriously, we've never seen a finish quite like that before, one that was equal parts intriguing and completely and utterly terrifying. Yoel Romero is an incredible physical specimen, the likes of which we may never see again. And though he never managed to capture middleweight gold, his close fights with the likes of Israel Adesanya, Paulo Costa, and Robert Whittaker proved that he was never too far from being the best 185-pound fighter on the planet. And for most fans, it was his classic rematch with the former champ Whittaker at UFC 225 that truly defined his reputation. Romero managed to find the Reaper's chin on several occasions in that bout, using his odd jack-in-the-box style to preserve his energy in those later rounds. And when he sprung out of his defensive shell, the results were, at times, brutal for the champion, as he rocked Whittaker on several occasions, disorienting him massively through even the slightest of connections. To his credit, Bobby Knuckles persevered, fought on, and edged Romero out of the scorecards. But even if you ask Whittaker himself, he'll tell you that 10 rounds in there with Yoel Romero was living hell. Next up, we have one of the most awkward-looking falls in MMA history, as the 300-pound behemoth that was Brock Lesnar was sent rolling around the canvas by the comparatively tiny Cain Velasquez. Okay, maybe we're being a bit harsh on the 240-pound legend, but even still, as his exceptional work rate began to wear in the WWE superstar, it was clear that there was a major skill deficit between the two. But even with that being the case, there was something almost comical to the way that Lesnar dropped, as he spun and rolled out of control like there was an almighty hill in the middle of the octagon. Sure enough, the fight was all over at that point, and Cain moved in to secure both the finish and the title along with it. But make no mistake, that image of Brock completely losing his footing within the cage was burned into the collective consciousness of the MMA fan base from that moment onwards. How can we make a list of devastating, equilibrium-destroying strikes and not give a mention to that time that Gabriel Gonzaga crow-copped Cro Cop? Though already established as a legend of the sport through his incredible run in Pride, to say that Mirko Cro Cop's UFC run was a bit underwhelming would be putting it lightly. But even though that there were questions about his Croatian icon's ability to make the transition over to the octagon, few could have suspected the disastrous end to his battle with the Brazilian contender Gonzaga. Mirko was the master of the head kick knockout at that point in time, having built up his reputation through a succession of huge knockouts under the Pride banner. So when Gonzaga managed to land Cro Cop's own signature technique on him for the KO finish, it was a true shocking moment. And as soon as that kick landed, Mirko's legs instantly turned to jelly. It was a one-hitter quitter, no controversy at all. As perhaps the most regularly cited example of a 10-7 round in MMA history, the fact that Freddie Edgar managed to survive the opening round onslaught of his rival Gary Maynard during their iconic second matchup just didn't make sense. We'd like to single out one particular moment where the answer's legs turned to jelly, but in reality, there's too many moments to count. As Maynard moved in to try to finish the fight, Edgar rolled around the ring wildly, unable to find his footing beneath him for enough time to regroup. It was a thrilling round, one of the most greatest feats of resilience that you're ever likely to see. And when you consider that Frankie managed to rebound and take control of the fight, yeah, this former lightweight champion was a special fighter. Out of all the names on this list, no fighter brings the same type of jelly-inducing power as the current UFC heavyweight champion Francis Ngannou. And though we probably could have filled up a separate list with only the Predator's best knockouts, for our money, it was his short uppercut on Cain Velasquez that takes home the gold. It wasn't the most devastating shot he's ever landed, but it managed to send a spark through Cain's body that caused him to drop down onto his knees, leading to both an embarrassingly quick TKO finish and an injury that would derail his plans for a return. It all happened so fast that it was hard to understand in real time, but replays will later show that the short, close-range shot that caused Velasquez to go out. And as soon as the uppercut found its mark, the way that Cain just flopped to the ground was truly a scary sight to behold. And finally, we come to the only bout on this list that contained within it two fighters who managed to induce a jelly-like state on one another in a relatively short space of time. To put it simply, Pat Barry versus Cheick Kongo was one of the craziest fights in MMA history. With both men packing fight-ending power, it was Barry who first connected, sending Kongo flailing onto the mat, unable to find his feet as his opponent moved in for what could have well been called as a finish there and then. But in a uniquely strange piece of refereeing, Dan Miragliotta seemed to change his mind at the final moment, opting instead to give the seemingly beaten Kongo a chance to survive. And sure enough, despite him being on the brink of defeat, Kongo fired off one final Hail Mary, a punch that caught and immediately staggered Pat Barry. Sensing his opportunity, Kongo closed the show with a follow-up strike that stiffened his beaten opponent. Honestly, MMA is a crazy sport. Of that, there is little doubt, but it doesn't get any crazier than this, folks. And that will just about do it for this video. Remember, if you enjoyed this list and want to help MMA Realm reach the top of the MMA YouTube game, be sure to leave a like on the video and comment before subscribing to the channel so you don't miss our weekly uploads.